Today's episode, I'm honoured to host Patrick Dykstra, former barrister, BAFTA award-winning marine conservationist, wildlife cinematographer and expedition leader. Our discussion traverses Patrick's transformative journey from the legal realm to the forefront of marine exploration, focusing on his experience in East Timor and the challenges faced by marine conservation efforts in the world today. Together we explore the decline of blue whale sightings off Sri Lanka's coast, shedding light on the intricate dynamics between wildlife preservation and sustainable tourism. Patrick shares captivating encounters with killer whales, sperm whales, and emphasises the critical role of responsible practices in marine conservation. Join us for an educational, enlightening exploration into marine life as Patrick brings forth a wealth of knowledge and insights on the urgent need for oceanic protection. In this episode, you'll see us sitting in East Timor, where we're wrecking the blue whales that migrate along the coastline.
Yeah, we're in Timor-Leste, also known as East Timor. So it's an interesting place. It's if you look at a map, it's completely surrounded on all sides by Indonesia. So it's this sort of little half of an island that the other half belongs to Indonesia, but it's a country unto itself. It used to be held by the Portuguese, and then it was held by the Indonesians, and they've recently got their freedom not too long ago, and so it's still an amazingly raw, fascinating, interesting, natural place to be.
And so, and what brings you here then in terms of, I mean, I know you as a sort of ex-lawyer, BAFTA award-winning marine conservationist, BBC cameraman, sort of quite a mix of things,
yeah,
a bit of a turn in careers. Just, do you want to talk us a bit through that? Why we're sitting on a balcony in the middle of East Timor with a bit of noise in the background, but
yeah, sure. No, it's it got on my radar maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I was looking, I'm always looking at places in the world where there is interesting ocean activity, particularly with large ocean species, whales, sharks, manta rays, these kind of things. And Timor got on my radar. I was just doing a bit of research, and it seemed like it might be a good place to come and see whales where nobody was looking yet. And so I came out maybe 6 years ago. I was only in the capital in Dili just to talk to a few people and see what's going on. And it seemed when you talk to the fishermen and the locals that there were quite a few whales spotted offshore here, particularly off the north coast. Yeah. And I couldn't stay very long that time. There weren't a lot of boats that were available to rent to go actually check it out. But I learned enough from the locals that it seemed like a place to come, interestingly, for blue whales, which are very, despite being the biggest animal to ever inhabit the planet, notoriously difficult to find reliably, and then certainly to get in the water and film. I do a lot of this research around the world, and a lot of times you hear stories about things, and then you go there, and the stories don't quite match reality. It might start with, there's this amazing, cave in Borneo where 8 million snakes come hatching, and it's the most incredible spectacle of snake extravaganza you've ever seen in your life. And then so you've seen that. Well, no, I haven't seen that, but my brother saw it. And then you go down this rabbit hole, and you finally go out there and check it out, and it turns out it wasn't 8 million snakes, but one guy saw one snake one time come out of this cave. And the story had just grown and grown, and until you go actually look at it yourself, you don't really know what the truth is. And so that's sort of been the case here, where I wanted to go and talk to people, and there were stories of lots of whales offshore, and then some of them seemed credible, so I came out here and talked to a few people, and the stories were from enough different people that I thought, okay, it's worth checking out myself. But when I came, it wasn't the season. But it seemed like the season was October into November, that there might be this massive whale migration happening. Sperm whales, blue whales, pilot whales, just off the north coast. So I sort of kept an eye on things over the last 5-6 years. And here we are again now, properly spending a couple of weeks with a proper boat offshore checking it out. That's the short version. There's lots of contacts I made over that time. Some guys here locally who I funded to build a boat. Yeah. Now the boat has been completed, a nice 100 horsepower engine on it, a shade, things you kind of want if you're going to stay out for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
My pink legs are definitely welcoming that shade.
Yeah. So it's but it's a fascinating place. The area around where we're sitting now is tin shacks basically, but this hotel was recently built. It's not quite open yet. We're among the first unofficial guests because it's not really open and ready, but but it's cool. These are the kind of things you want to be on the forefront of, and it may turn into something amazing.
So when you say that in terms of you want to be on the forefront of them, in terms of you're a lawyer and now you're, I don't know, marine conservationist, freelance cameraman, you've got your own films out, you've done BBC work. What was the story behind that between lawyer to then the situation you're in now, in terms of when I first met you in Dubai 8-9 years ago, you were still a lawyer?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. My passion was really being out in the ocean and whales and particularly blue whales, and I was just out spending all of my vacation days and free time trying to film and photograph whales, not because I wanted to be a cameraman or do film work, just because I love them and I think they're really interesting, and they're really hard. It's really difficult to get in the water close to blue whales, to killer whales, to sperm whales, and that challenge was fun for me. And I had decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore for a number of reasons. And I took a vacation to North Norway because I was reading Norwegian fish catch data and talking to people.
As you do.
Well, I was looking for killer whales and a reliable place on Earth to go spend time with killer whales. And in 2011, there really wasn't one. But that's when they first started a particular class of herring, the 2007 class year of herring, suddenly decided to swim into the fjords close to the coast of Norway instead of doing what most herring do and spend their entire life off of the coast, offshore. So that was interesting to me. I saw this herring class, this class year, come on shore or migrate close to shore, and I thought, well, I'd love to go see if those are also being followed by killer whales who mainly predate on them. So I funded it myself, flew up there, brought my cameras, and lo and behold, there were hundreds of killer whales following this particular shoal of herring into these fjords around North Norway. It was great. I swam with them, I filmed them, I flew my drone over them, and I made a little vacation video, basically, of here's my trip to Norway, and I put it on Vimeo, the video sharing website like YouTube. And about 2 months later, I got a phone call from a researcher at the BBC who had stumbled upon my video and said, this is really great, we love your video, we'd like to use some of the footage that you filmed in an upcoming nature series that we're making. It was sort of like a dream come true for a lot of people.
So were you one of the first people in the water with orcas and killer whales?
Up there, yeah, certainly. Yeah, it wasn't something that was really done much in 2011.
But the clue's in the name, isn't it? Killer whales, in terms of... But so what gave you the confidence to do that, in terms of you're now really one of the leading... there are a lot of different wildlife specialists out there in their different fields and different formats, etc. But I would say you're one of the leading whale specialists, definitely sort of film cameramen, etc. like that. But you've studied a lot of their behaviour, and that's really been giving you massive rewards on the filming front, correct me if I'm wrong. But what gives you the confidence to sort of go, right, I'm going to get in water with a killer whale?
Yeah.
Which we can be criticised of calling them killer whales as well, can't we? Because they're orcas, and it's not always living up to that name.
Well, that's not necessarily true, to be honest. The scientific community mainly still refers to them as killer whales.
Yeah.
And so I spend time with a lot of scientists, including Norwegian Orca Survey and the University of Tromsø's scientists. I've been with both of those outfits in North Norway. They've been greatly helpful for me in my work. I hope I've helped them in their work. I've donated some camera tags and some boat time and some film footage to the two sort of, at least in Norway, leading groups that study killer whales. These are scientists with PhDs. Yeah. They call them killer whales.
Yeah.
So I feel comfortable calling them orca or killer whales, and I think everybody else should too. I don't think we're doing them a disservice by giving them one name or the other. Those other names.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a bit of research. I realized nobody's ever been killed by a killer whale.
Yeah.
No human in the wild. In captivity, that's a different thing. But in the wild, never. So, I thought it's probably okay.
Probably.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Honestly, I wasn't.
Yeah.
But it seemed okay, and I met up with a couple of guys. One interesting German sailor who had been spending a lot of time, Marco Schulenberg, with killer whales. And when I first saw this herring migration, I went up to North Norway. I met a fisherman who had said, "Oh, well, maybe you should contact this guy because he sails his sailboat around killer whales all the time, sometimes year round." So I got in touch with him, and he agreed that it was safe, and he had been doing it some himself, sort of off the radar. He's an interesting character. He sort of does his own thing and doesn't put much out there about it. So we teamed up and spent the 2012 13, 14 seasons just going on our own because we loved it.
So with that, I mean, we sort of started collaborating about 7-8 years ago and bringing sort of conservation.
I think it's more. Well, I think it's almost 10 now.
Is it 10
I
years?
think we met in 2013, 2012, 2013. Right now it's
Yeah.
2023.
So in terms of and that was really sort of trying to collaborate on conservation, on travel tourism, and the marine side of things, and that's, I mean, it's something I always struggle with as well in terms of, you know, how to balance that in a very sort of responsible way. But we started some of the first trips for swimming with orcas in Norway, blue whales in Sri Lanka, which we can talk about in a bit, and also sperm whales in Dominica. What's your stance on that in terms of where's the balance?
Sure. I think anything you do with wildlife, you have to do a cost-benefit analysis on, and everybody has their own cost-benefit analysis. I have mine. If I go in the water with a whale, and that whale decides to come over and see me, I've impacted its life. It could be feeding. It could be doing something else. It's chosen to come and look at me and detour to see me. So that's an impact. Yeah. So you got to think, what impact does that have?
I'm enjoying the pig noises in the background. Sorry.
We are in a very, very rural location out here.
Sorry, carry on.
And you think, well, whatever I'm doing should have a net positive impact on these whales as a population, and hopefully for this individual whale, whichever one has taken its time out. So, you know, that's why I think what we do is helpful. You take like-minded people. We only take usually 4 people on a trip. The impact is minimal. Wherever we work, whether it's, you know, and I can go over some examples of this. In Norway, we've donated a ton of footage to the Norwegian Orca Survey. We donated 2 $20,000 camera tags to the University of Tromsø to use for their research. We've showcased both of those universities and research groups on television, on Discovery Channel, on BBC. We do the same in Dominica. We spent $20,000 on whale-safe fish aggregation devices. We fund a lot of community projects for education, for marine science education. Sri Lanka, we donated a significant proportion of all of the funds that we brought into that country to the research there, to a book called Out of the Blue by Howard Martinston, to his work. We gave a lot of boat days to different researchers who wanted to come out because the boat is the expensive part. So all of these things, you hope collectively, if you put 2 people and me in the water several times over the course of a week and certain whales detour or come to see you, you hope that whatever impact that had on them is outweighed by making 4 more people in the world fall in love with whales.
Through education.
Yeah, and hopefully donate their time and resources. We've had several guests who've come with us through the Natural World Safaris trips who certainly the trip fee they paid helped. But, you know, there's a good example. We just had a guy in Dominica, Matt Grossman, a lovely guest from Natural World Safaris, who after he went fell in love with the area and the people, and he has now funded at least 2 full-time positions for 2 Dominicans to work full-time doing whale outreach between the whales and the community. Yeah. And he does that with his own money. He pays 2 full-time salaries. He flies down there every year to check on them. He gets and works with another group, the Dominican Sperm Whale Project. And that's because he came with us originally and fell in love with whales. And now, outside of Natural World Safaris and me, he does his own conservation work. So
it's education through that fun side of it, and travel and things like that. And I mean, even out here, you know, which I didn't realise at first before I came out, you basically funded the boat to facilitate any of these trips, these sort of recce trips that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, there's just, sorry.
That's right.
Excuse me. There just wasn't a suitable vessel here at the time. And so I, gave the money in advance to have a boat built from fiberglass. It was fiberglass to shade put on. We had to have a 100 horsepower engine imported from overseas because you can't get one of those here. Now that boat is the boat out of Baucau, out of this half of the country, that can go out and keep up with these whales and study where they're going and what their migration pattern is, which depth line they're on, how many of them are out there. There's just so much we still don't know. But at least now there's a proper boat in the country that can go out and do that research.
And that touches on a bit, which I don't think I realised until we were chatting over the last couple of days, in regards to how little we know about whales and their movements and habits, etc. You were giving some examples today, which I'll let you recount, but it sort of links into Sri Lanka and the blue whales in terms of that was a big success, wasn't it, for many years, and then that has now completely changed in terms of the blue whale seems to have sort of disappeared from that area. Do you want to just chat us through a bit about that in terms of because no one really knows why that's happened. We've got our sort of suspicions and stuff,
Sure.
and there are various sort of different sort of assumptions. But what do you think that is? 'Cause
Yeah.
that was 8-10. No, it was about 10 plus years ago that you were doing that, wasn't that?
Yeah, so I first started going out in 2007, so that's 15 years. That was during the Civil War. But I had read some research data from a recon trip that went in the 1970s to Sri Lanka. And there was another trip, one of them was on a boat called the Tulip, which had done sperm whale recon along the coast of Sri Lanka decades ago. And they had made some notes that said, we did see sperm whales. And there were a couple of sort of footnotes that said we also saw some blue whale.
Yeah.
But that's really all that was out there. And that was from reading an old research report from this research vessel that had passed through. So I thought, well, that plus the bathymetrics, plus the way the ocean floor rises so quickly, so close to the coast of South Sri Lanka, is worth checking out. And so I went out there during the war. That was a challenging one. There was, again, no suitable boat in South Sri Lanka to do that kind of work. And you could really, there was I don't know if it was a law, but there was a rule in place that you were not supposed to be out at sea with an engine any bigger than 15 horsepower because there was a war going on and the resistance was ramming naval vessels with suicide boats. And so we had to import a 40 horsepower engine, which was the biggest one we were allowed to get in the country. And that was the first boat sort of in that part of the world where we could actually keep up with whales. But we didn't know if whales were there, so we had to go out and find them. And it turned out that, for a number of years, that was quite possibly the biggest blue whale population on Earth, but it was sort of hidden in plain sight. Fishermen avoided whales. They didn't want them to sink their boat. They thought they might get run into, so they didn't look for them or keep track of them. They tried to stay as far away from them as they could. And then the war ended, and we were able to start working there. I think my first guest trip there was 2011. I think we started together in 2013 with guests. And it worked phenomenally well.
Yeah.
And for years, we were the only ones going out doing that. 13, 14, 15, there was no one else out there. And then, of course, as happens, mass tourism founded eventually, and there became a lot of whale watching and some sort of copycat operations.
That's the trouble with success, isn't it? In these areas, and it's about trying to manage that, which you also have an input on in terms of you work very closely with the local organisations or governments. I mean, you've met with the president over here in terms of how you feel, the industry or the whale watching and research, etc., should be constructed.
Yeah, and it's important to that's part of the reason why I met with the president here, because there's not much infrastructure here for this. There's not much going on, but there will be. And the problem is, once you allow people to start relying on whale tourism for their income, if you say then, okay, there's too many boats doing this now, we've got to dial it back and we're going to only allow 2 a day to go out. Well, if there's 10 a day already going out, you've got 8 people who are going to come to you and say, how do I feed my kids? This is my livelihood. So the key is to get in there early and not let people have that as their livelihood and establish that and rely on that income, because there's only so much pressure the whales can take. So you've got to have some kind of sensible system about whale watching, about whale filming, about whale tourism generally, about how many boats can we have out there at the same time and not impact these animals and chase them away. And that was at least part of the problem in Sri Lanka. They did not regulate it at all, hardly.
And so why do you think that, because now the whales aren't really there, is that because of over-tourism? Is it because of rising sea temperatures or prey base or other predators coming to the area? What's your sort of... Because it's a fascinating sort of area, isn't it, in terms of what's happened? And we've seen it in the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's a really big mystery, and I think you probably hit on most of the reasons why that happened. There was uncontrolled tourism, people chasing the whales all over the place. Anytime a blue whale came near the coast in the northeast, northwest, or the south, which was the 3 sort of whale hotspots, they got chased by 30 boats all the time, trying to see them, trying to put swimmers in with very little regulation. And that probably combined with something changing in the ocean temperature, moving their food source. All the food source has to do there is move 10 miles offshore, and now it's not 10 miles out, it's 20 miles out, and that's just too far for boats and people to go see them. And so that probably played a role, but certainly uncontrolled tourism didn't help the matter at all. And now they haven't seen hardly any blue whales in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it's probably they've done that to themselves.
So what would you say, is there the biggest problem you face in marine conservation? Is there one thing that, wherever you are, whether it's Timor-Leste or Sri Lanka or Dominica, wherever, that you always come up against? Maybe there isn't, is there?
I mean, there is. It's us. It's human beings, right? No matter where you go, you see whales get entangled in fishing gear. If we weren't throwing ghost nets overboard and putting fishing gear in the water, that would never happen. So that's a common issue. You see a lot of times whales ingesting plastic and plastic bottles and getting it in their digestive tract. That's us. That's humans putting plastic out in the ocean or throwing it on the ground here without understanding. If you throw that on the ground here, we're 10 miles from the ocean. The first big rain, that plastic bottle's down in the ocean because the rain takes it down that direction. Yeah. It ends up from this field into that ditch, into that culvert that runs into that river that hits the sea. Yeah. Probably by the end of the day, it's in the ocean. And then over tourism and social media has not helped that. You used to have a situation where you could go somewhere and spend 3 or 4 or 5, 6 seasons before people get onto it, and then it becomes overcrowded. And now it can happen in one season.
So on that, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I suppose. And I work in travel, and you do to a certain extent as well. Playing devil's advocate, what would you say to those that criticise swimming with marine species and whales?
Sure.
In terms of for good or bad. I think it's because for me, I see both sides of it.
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of people who criticize swimming with whales have a very valid point. Yeah. Right. Swimming with whales without regulation is a problem, and swimming with whales has a bigger impact than whale watching, which has a much smaller impact. It's a more high impact on the whale activity, and if it's not regulated, it's a problem. And you see that in some parts of the world, which is why we've moved away from doing trips in certain places, because the government won't regulate it. We don't want to be a part of the problem. Yeah. If it goes mainstream and there's hundreds of boats and the government doesn't listen to reason, I've pulled out of those places, and I think we have too. So you got to be very careful. But that's why, again, places like this, we're on the ground here before mass tourism takes hold, before there's hardly anyone else doing this, meeting with the leader of the country to convince them, here's what you have, and it's great. And if you don't regulate it now, you're going to chase it away and have a problem. Yeah. We work very well with the top leaders, the Prime Minister and the President in Dominica. We've had them on the boat before and sort of explained to them, this is what you have, this is your current system, this is how to make it better, this is how to avoid having a problem, and they've been very receptive. And so, it's important to be that voice in these places, because the whales can't speak for themselves, and often you get a lot of other voices who are really just trying to make short-term money. If you're a boat captain, or you rent your boat, or you run tours, especially if you're not from that country, your incentive is just to say more, and make it in the short. And if you chase the whales away, or it becomes a bad tourism experience because there's too many people doing it, you don't care. We're not that. We want to be there on the ground early, making sure that these are, heavily regulated situations, so you don't impact the whales.
So then, I mean, the other sort of side of things that you've moved into now, sort of, and you're quite a humble guy, really almost through no choice of your own, is the sort of film side of things. Do you want to talk us through that a bit in terms of, I think I've got a private showing tonight of Patrick and the Whale, but you've also done Chasing Ocean's Giants as well, which have both been big successes, haven't they?
Yeah, that's been really good. Yeah, so that's more the in front of the camera stuff. Just to close the loop here, I posted that video on Vimeo, and this BBC researcher saw it and called me, and I said, look, you can have the footage. They said, well, we want to buy it from you. I said, no, you can have it. I'm not a cameraman. I'm a hobbyist. Take it. But I can't send it to you now because I'm currently traveling. I'm in Dominica, and the hard drives are back home. I said, oh, well, what are you doing in Dominica? I said, well, I'm trying to swim with sperm whales and film them. And I said, oh, geez, well, we have sperm whales on our program as well. Maybe we should have a bigger conversation. So I flew to Bristol and had a bigger conversation, and that show ended up being Blue Planet 2, and that was really early days of it. So I got to work on, they used that footage, but then I also got to work on other film shoots for that program, and then that did really well.
And you were one of the only guys at that stage with drone footage.
Yeah, I was doing early days drone stuff. That helped. Yeah. That certainly helped to get my foot in the door. And then I ended up winning a BAFTA for my camera work on that one, which is just fantastic. Yeah. And then that led on to lots of other film work, because everybody who worked on Blue Planet 2 some stayed at the BBC, and some went to Netflix, and some went to National Geographic, and some to Apple TV. And so you end up getting to work on lots of other programs, and I've probably been lucky enough to work on 15 or 20 major programs on all of these broadcasters: Netflix, Apple, Amazon, other BBC shows, which has been really great. And then, someone approached me about. I got a call from a sort of young, unknown producer named James Reed at the time, and he said, I'm researching a film on blue whales, and I Googled blue whales, and I keep coming across your name. Can you give me 5 minutes of your time? I just want to pick your brain for my blue whale film. I said, sure. And then I said, well, why don't you, I'm going to go out on a Natural World Safaris trip in a couple of weeks to film and photograph blue whales. Why don't you join? You're an interesting guy. The guests won't mind having you. We asked the guest. They said, have him join. He came, really nice guy. After a week of spending time on a boat together, seeing blue whales, he said to me, which I'm very flattered by, he said, you know what? I still want to make a blue whale film someday, but after spending a week with you, what I really want to do is make a TV series about you and about these things you do. You were here with blue whales in the early days. You were in Norway before anyone was looking for those. You've done this multiple times in different parts of the world. It could be a really interesting television series. And I said, sure, go ahead. So he pitched that. Discovery Channel said, we love it. They picked it up. So we did an 8-part series, what follows my journey around the world, working with the world's top scientists in Dominica, Russia, Norway, the Maldives, Colombia, Palau, and made a really, I think, interesting series about really interesting animals in those parts of the world: bowhead whales, sperm whales, killer whales, manta rays, and that did really well, thankfully. And James Reed moved on. The next project he worked on was called My Octopus Teacher, and then that was on Netflix, and he won an Oscar for his work on that one. So his career really took off from chasing ocean giants, which is great. I couldn't be happier for him. But I do think, just to not to give a life lesson here, but there is a parallel between what happened in my career as a cameraman and what happened in how I got into hosting television shows. Right? BBC called me and wanted this footage. I said, you can have it. I could have tried to charge them every nickel I could get. I could have, made it, but I didn't. I gave it to them, and they loved it, and that led on to other work for them, which led on to lots of other film work. This unknown guy called me. Can I ask you about blue whales? I didn't give him 2 minutes of my time. I gave him an hour on the phone. Then he flew out, and then that led to this TV series, which has now led to other things. I could have dismissed him. He was unknown at the time. I could have not spent a minute with him, but the moral, I think, is be nice to people and be generous with your time and with your footage, and it can lead to amazing things. And that's exactly what happened with me. So then Chasing Ocean Giants did well. I was then asked to do a TV show, or a feature film called Patrick and the Whale, which is now airing in theaters. Yeah, it's airing in theaters. It's in movie theaters in Austria. It's in movie theaters in Germany. It's been picked up by PBS in the States, so we're making a version for PBS to go out on U.S. television. We're in talks with IMAX about that one, but so far it's done really well. It's won at least 5 to 10 different major film festivals. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, which is obviously one of the big 4 in the world for major film festivals. So no, it's been really successful, thankfully.
So the filming and your passion really has been a bit of a portal for everything else. And I always say that for me in my job, it's a portal for conservation or photography or travel and different elements, which is great. So what's the next thing? Is there something that you've got on the horizon that you'd like your film work, the direction you'd like it to take you? Is there something that you've got sort of on the horizon?
There's always stuff on the horizon. I have 2 emails a week with film companies about, hey, let's pitch a show about, I was recently working with dolphin superpods in Central America, and we filmed a lot of that. And I was asked by a production company, well, let's make a show about that. This is an amazing story. Your footage is really incredible. Let's make a 50-minute TV show. That's currently in front of, I believe, ITV and PBS in the States to be a 1-hour documentary about my work with these dolphins in Central America. So that may be something. I'm asked to do lots of camera work behind the camera on a regular basis. There's always something on the horizon. You probably know Blue Planet 3 just got commissioned. That could be a lot of future work. But no, I really enjoy taking non-professionals out to see.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that I'd sort of noted down here in terms of you mix the sort of the travel and client side of it with the film work very well. You know what I mean? And you seem to sort of, you fluctuate a bit between them both, but you seem to appreciate both sides of that, which I think is quite rare as well. And I think you touched on it in terms of you're very generous in terms of that. You never really seem to want to keep it to yourself. You're a bit of a teacher like that. You want to bring people along and show them what there is out there. Would that be fair enough?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I do enjoy the film work, and it's great when you can film something and have, some of these big BBC documentaries, 20 million people watch it. That's fantastic. But yeah, a lot of times when you're on film shoots, you're working, and you're with other people who are at work, and it's really fascinating to take people who are doctors or lawyers or teachers and take them out to see these things, and just to see the look on their face when they, I don't know, swim with a blue whale or swim with a sperm whale or see it for the first time, and that's fun, and that. I don't feel like I'm at work when I'm doing that, because we're just out having a good time, and maybe we're out looking for killer whales, and then we see some humpback whales, and then we might divert and go swim with some humpback whales because they're cool too. And
we have pilot whales just like that.
We had a nice group of pilot whales out there yesterday, which is really fascinating. We didn't go looking for pilot whales; we were looking for blue whales, but then we saw pilot whales. It was really great, and that's really cool too, to just go out with people who don't spend their life at sea like a lot of professional camera operators for big documentaries do. So I really, it fluctuates every year. Some years I do a lot more days as a cameraman. Some days I do a lot more days as a TV show host. Some days I do a lot more days just taking guests out, which I really enjoy. I think in the next couple of years I'm going to lean, because I've done a lot of work behind the camera, and we just did Patrick and the Whale and a bunch of touring for that. I think at least for this year and probably into next year, I'm going to lean a bit more heavily into taking guests out. I've turned down a number of cameraman opportunities over the last couple of months because I really am sort of eager to take a bit of a break from that and lean a bit more into taking private guests and doing some trips with natural world safaris and it's just a different feeling, and I want to. The last couple of film shoots I was on, I felt like I wasn't quite as passionate as I am normally, and I think taking a step back and maybe taking a year and doing stuff with more private guests who come out, there's just
gives you a bit more space.
Yeah, there's an element of joy in people. You go out, pilot whales, it's amazing. We came to look for blue whales, but we found pilot whales. You don't get as much of that on big film shoots, and so I want to get a bit of that joy that you feel the everyman who goes out on a whale trip. They love it. They see a whale for the first time in their life and they're super excited, and I'm going to do a bit more of that at least in 2024, and then we'll see after that if I want to be in front of the camera again on things, or I want to be behind the camera for documentaries, or if I want to keep doing tourism.
So what, just to, I suppose, to sort of round it off and sort of prove how little we know about whales. I mean, you reeled off, and sorry to put you on the spot, but reeled off some facts earlier when we were on the boat, in terms of what we don't know. I mean, you were the first guy to film a nursing blue whale calf, I think. And we were sort of asking around that, and you said, well, actually, we don't know this about whales, and this, and this, and this, and this. What are those things again? Because I found that fascinating.
Sure, no. I mean, any discussion about, hey, tell me about blue whales, or tell me about sperm whales. I mean, any discussion about these whales should start with, first of all, we know almost nothing.
Yeah.
Let's go into a handful of things we do know. But how many blue whales are out there? We have no idea. We can guess at best. Has anyone ever seen one give birth? Nope. Has anyone ever seen one nurse? Yeah. One guy filmed it one time. That was me. Yeah. Luckily. That's it. There's no other footage of nursing blue whale out there. Where do they mate? Has anyone ever seen them mate? Do they do it at the surface? Do they do it down below? How long does it take? Are they monogamous, or do they have other? We don't know. We don't know anything about it. What's their migratory route? Where do these whales that we see off Timor go? Where are they coming from?
That's amazing.
I mean,
it's pretty rare for sort of species these days, wildlife species, that you know so little.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That is true of the ocean species. Any animal you can have in captivity, a lion. You've seen it nurse, you've seen it give birth, you've seen it mate. You kind of get what it does. You can't have a blue whale or a sperm whale or a fin whale or a killer whale. Killer whales, unfortunately, yes, at SeaWorld, but these other big whale species, you can't have them in captivity. They die, yeah. And so, and they're so big and they move so fast and they spend so much of their life under the ocean, and boats are really expensive. The whale scientists, you're talking thousands of dollars a day just to get on a boat. And how many days can they afford to do that? Plus flights and meals and travel and hotel, and it's very expensive.
So then, on the spot, last question, what's your favourite whale? I think I know the answer, but...
Ooh, I don't know. I think that fluctuates. It was blue whales for more than a decade. It was blue whales for a very long time.
That's my suspicion,
yeah. But I think I'm equally interested now in orcas and killer whales. Yeah. They've sort of stolen my heart a bit. No offense to the blue whales, but that comes. I mean, I spent, I spent 12 years, more than a month every year, tracking and going in the water and filming blue whales.
But would you say you spend more time with blue whales than anyone else on the planet, pretty much?
I would imagine underwater, yeah, that's probably true. Certainly people who work on whale watching boats that go out 365 days a year would have more time than me, but getting in the water and photographing them, there's a couple of us, but yeah.
But that's quite a claim as well in terms of, I mean, it's fantastic because they are hard to find. You know, I mean, they're hard to find, they're hard to get in the water. You've talked us through how we do it in a responsible way and not disturbing them and stuff, but it's still bloody hard, isn't it? Even once you've got them, you know what I mean, they dive, you know what I mean, they're moving fast, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you can get lucky and have a week where you see them every day, starting at 10 a.m. and you're out till 4 p.m. and not have a successful underwater encounter because they are so shy. I mean, I've been blessed to have hundreds over the years, but I've also had a lot of days you go out and you don't find whales. Yeah. And then I've had a lot of days you go out and you do find whales, but you can't get close to them underwater because they're so shy.
Well, we've had a couple of days where we haven't seen them, but it's our last day tomorrow, so we're just saving for that, yeah?
Well,
the grand finale.
Well, like I mentioned on the boat today, every good story has an arc. You don't want to start with the climax or you're not going to read the rest of the book. You want to build up. You know, you want to have nothing the first day and then a little more the next day and then bang, the grand finale on the last day. So that's sort of how I've planned it. I actually saw several blue whales out there today. I just didn't say anything because I didn't want to go to them because it's only day 2. So
we'll save it for tomorrow.
We got to build up. Yeah. Exactly.
And on that note, I think we'll finish.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Pat. Cheers, buddy. Thanks, man.